Chapter 4. Revelation and Transformation. The pattern within the pattern. Time was different in the barrier. Lyra, or the thing that had been Lyra, that was still Lyra, but also more and less than Lyra, experienced existence as a vast, overwhelming symphony. Every thread in the tapestry sang its own note, and she heard them all simultaneously. The joy of a child taking her first steps, the grief of a widow burying her husband, the quiet contentment of a farmer watching sunset over his fields. All of it, all at once, forever. It should have driven her mad. It would have, except for Kale. His presence within their shared consciousness was an anchor, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in the overwhelming immensity. When the grief of 1,000 dying threads threatened to drown her, he was there, holding her steady. When the void pressed against the barrier with renewed hunger, they faced it together.
"How long has it been?"
she asked him, their thoughts mixing like watercolors.
"I don't know,"
he responded.
"Days? Months? Time doesn't work the same way here."
"I miss having a body."
"Me too."
They fell into contemplative silence, which wasn't really silence, because they could still hear the entire tapestry singing, but it was as close to peace as they could find. And then Lyra noticed something strange. A thread, a small, insignificant thread, belonging to a seamstress in a distant city, began to fray. Not because of the void, but naturally. The woman was dying of old age, her thread reaching its natural end. Lyra had witnessed hundreds of such deaths since taking her place in the barrier. But this time, something different happened. As the thread frayed and began to dissolve, a tiny spark of light emerged from it, a fragment of the woman's essence, pure and luminous. And instead of disappearing into nothingness, it drifted toward the center of the tapestry, toward Lyra and Kale, toward the barrier.
"What is that?"
Kale wondered. The spark touched their combined thread, and suddenly Lyra knew.
It was memory, experience, everything the seamstress had been, her loves, her losses, her small triumphs and quiet regrets.
And as the spark merged with the barrier, Lyra felt it become part of them, part of the pattern they were holding.
"It's not just us defending the tapestry,"
Lyra realized with dawning wonder.
"We're collecting it, preserving it. Every thread that ends naturally brings its light to us."
"But why?"
Before Lyra could answer, more sparks began to appear. A soldier dying bravely in battle, a mother passing peacefully in her sleep, a musician whose final note hung in the air like a prayer. Each one brought their light to the barrier, adding their essence to the growing accumulation. And Lyra began to understand something that Aemon had never taught her, perhaps had never known himself. The barrier wasn't just a wall against the void, it was becoming something new.
"I need to look deeper,"
Lyra told Kale.
"into the pattern itself. Will you come with me?"
"Where you go, I go,"
he responded simply. Together they dove into the tapestry, not just observing it from their position at the center, but actually traveling through it, following threads to their origins and endings, reading the grand design that billions of individual lives created. And what they discovered changed everything. The pattern wasn't random, it wasn't chaos. There was a design, but not the kind imposed from above by gods or weavers. It was emergent, growing from the threads themselves, from the choices and connections that every living being made. Love created patterns of interdependence. Conflict created patterns of transformation. Death created patterns of renewal. Even suffering, that terrible, inevitable suffering that Corvus had tried to eliminate, created patterns of resilience and growth and meaning.
"The tapestry doesn't need to be perfect.
Lyra realized.
It needs to be alive."
But there was something else, something darker beneath the beautiful complexity. The void wasn't just pressing against the tapestry from outside, it was growing inside it too. Everywhere the pattern had gaps, places where threads should connect but didn't, where love was rejected, where understanding was refused, where people chose isolation over connection, the void found purchase. Small pockets of nothingness scattered throughout the tapestry like cancer.
This is why it's winning,
Kale said grimly.
We're holding it back at the center, but it's already infiltrated the edges. Every moment someone chooses disconnection, they create a little more void.
Then we need to show them.
Lyra said with sudden certainty.
Show them what they're doing. Show them the pattern.
How? We're trapped in the barrier. We can't leave. We can't even communicate with the outside world.
Lyra thought about the sparks, the fragments of light from ending threads that had been joining with the barrier. An idea began to form, wild and impossible and terrifying.
What if we don't need to leave? What if we can reach out through the threads themselves?
Lyra, that's not how it works. The barrier is meant to be passive, defensive. If we start actively manipulating threads, we'll be doing exactly what Corvus did, imposing our will on the pattern.
Not imposing. Illuminating.
She turned their shared attention to a thread nearby, a young man in Chimera, ironically. Someone contemplating suicide, his thread dimming with despair.
Watch.
Carefully, gently, Lyra reached out through the tapestry and touched his thread. Not pulling, not pushing, just showing him, letting him see what she saw, how his thread connected to his mother's, his sister's, his friends, how his ending wouldn't just erase him, but would tear holes in a dozen other lives, how even in his suffering, his thread added something vital to the pattern. She showed him the beauty of his own existence, reflected back through the tapestry itself. The young man gasped. She felt it through the threads and began to cry. Not from despair this time, but from recognition, from being truly seen. His thread brightened.
That was incredible.
Kale breathed.
Do it again. Show me how.
Together they began reaching out to threads throughout the tapestry, not forcing change, but offering perspective, showing isolated people the connections they couldn't see, revealing to the angry and bitter how their pain created ripples through the pattern, demonstrating to the hopeless that their threads still had destinations they couldn't perceive. They became, in essence, mirrors, reflecting the pattern back to those who were lost within it. And slowly, remarkably, the tapestry began to heal. Threads that had been isolated started reaching out, forming new connections. Pockets of void began to shrink as people chose engagement over withdrawal. The pattern grew richer, more complex, more resilient. But there was a cost. Every time they reached out, they spent some of their own essence. Their combined thread grew slightly dimmer, slightly thinner. They were using themselves up, burning their merged existence like a candle to light the darkness.
We can't keep this up forever,
Kale warned.
If we exhaust ourselves completely, the barrier fails, and the void wins anyway.
I know,
Lyra admitted.
but I can't just watch people suffer when I could help them see. There has to be a balance. A way to help without destroying ourselves.
They pulled back, returning their focus to the center of the tapestry, and found something waiting for them. A presence. It wasn't the void. This was warm, luminous, conscious in a way that felt almost familiar. And as Lyra's awareness touched it, she recognized what it was. The accumulated sparks. The fragments of light from all the ending threads that had joined with the barrier. They'd been slowly merging, combining, becoming something new, becoming a voice.
Who are you?
Lyra asked.
We are the pattern itself.
Came the response, in a voice that was thousands of voices speaking in harmony.
We are every thread that has ended, every life that has completed its weaving, every soul that has returned its light to the tapestry. We are memory and legacy, and hope.
Why are you here?
Because you called us. Because you showed us that even in ending, we continue. Our threads may fray, but our light remains, preserved in the pattern we helped create.
Kale's confusion rippled through their shared consciousness.
I don't understand. If you're the pattern, then what are we protecting? What is the void trying to destroy?
The void seeks to eliminate becoming.
The pattern explained.
It sees existence as an error, complexity as chaos that must be corrected. It would freeze the tapestry in perfect eternal stillness. No change, no growth, no death, because no life. Just endless, unchanging nothing.
But that's what death is, isn't it?
Lyra asked.
Return to nothingness.
No, the pattern said gently.
Death is transformation. The thread ends, but its light joins the pattern. Its connections remain. Its impact echoes forward through every life it touched. That is not nothingness. That is eternal contribution to the whole.
Understanding crashed through Lyra like a wave.
Corvus was wrong.
She whispered.
He thought death was the enemy, the error in the pattern that needed to be corrected. But death is what makes the pattern beautiful. It's what makes our choices matter. If threads never ended, there'd be no growth, no change, no meaning.
And the void is wrong too.
Kale added.
It thinks stillness is peace, but real peace comes from acceptance, from flowing with the pattern instead of fighting it.
Yes,
The pattern confirmed.
but understanding this intellectually is not enough. The void grows because people fear ending, fear change, fear the complexity of existence. They create little voids within themselves, refusing to connect, refusing to grow, refusing to accept that endings are part of the pattern.
So, how do we stop it?
Lyra demanded.
How do we teach everyone what we've learned?
You cannot.
The pattern said.
Not from here. Not while you remain trapped in the barrier.
Hope and terror flared simultaneously in Lyra's consciousness.
Are you saying there's a way out?
There is, but it requires sacrifice of a different kind.
The pattern showed them. Their combined thread, woven so tightly into the center of the tapestry that it had become part of the foundation itself. To leave would mean unraveling what they'd become, separating what they'd joined.
You would lose the connection you share.
The pattern explained.
Become separate beings again. You would be mortal, limited, blind to most of the pattern's complexity. But you would also be free.
Lyra felt Kale's immediate resistance.
No, I won't let you face the world alone again. I won't go back to that isolation.
We wouldn't be alone.
Lyra said softly.
We'd have the memory of this connection. We'd know what it means to truly see each other, to be seen. That doesn't go away just because we're separate.
You don't know that. What if we can't find each other again? What if...
Then we trust the pattern.
Lyra interrupted.
We trust that if our threads are meant to reconnect, they will. But right now, the tapestry needs us to be more than defenders. It needs us to be teachers, witnesses, living proof that endings aren't failures.
There's another option.
The pattern interjected.
You could remain as you are. Continue holding the barrier, reaching out occasionally to help those most in need. It is slower, but eventually the tapestry might heal.
Eventually. But how many threads break while we wait? How many people suffer in isolation, creating new pockets of void?
The pattern didn't answer. The choice was theirs. Lyra turned their shared attention to Kale, or the part of their merged consciousness that was most distinctly him. She felt his fear of separation, his terror of returning to the loneliness he'd known before. But she also felt his courage, his fundamental decency, his willingness to endure anything if it meant protecting others.
What do you want to do?
She asked him.
I want to stay merged with you, forever.
He admitted.
But I know that's selfish. The world needs more than two people trapped in a barrier. It needs people who understand the pattern, teaching others to see it.
We could do that together.
If we survive the separation. If we remember what we learned here, if we can function as individuals again, after being one being for
He paused.
however long it's been.
Then we'll figure it out together. Separately, but together.
Lyra felt certainty crystallize within her.
I choose to leave the barrier. I choose to return to the world, even if it means losing this connection. Because the pattern needs witnesses who can touch it and teach it, not just guard it from within.
She felt Kale's resistance waver, then finally dissolve into acceptance. And beneath the acceptance, something that might have been relief. Because as beautiful as their merger had been, it had also been a kind of death of their individual selves, their separate identities, their chance to grow independently.
Okay,
He said simply.
let's go home.
The unraveling hurt worse than the weaving. The pattern guided them, carefully separating threads that had become one, distinguishing between Lyra's silver gold and Kale's broken brown. It felt like being torn in half, or like being whole for the first time in eternity.
You will not be defenseless.
The pattern told them as they separated.
I will take your place in the barrier. All the accumulated light from ending threads, all the wisdom and love and courage that has returned to the tapestry. I am strong enough now to hold back the void. You have given me that gift.
But you're just fragments,
Lyra protested.
memories of the dead. You don't have the power of a living weaver.
I have something better.
The pattern responded.
I have the collective will of everyone who ever lived. Every thread that ends in acceptance rather than fear adds to my strength. And you will go into the world and teach others to end well, to live fully, to embrace the pattern instead of fearing it. Each person you reach makes me stronger.
Their threads pulled apart completely, and Lyra felt herself falling, not downward, but inward, collapsing back into the boundaries of a single consciousness, a single perspective, a single life. It was claustrophobic. It was terrifying. It was profoundly, overwhelmingly lonely. And then she drew breath with actual lungs, and opened eyes she'd forgotten she had, and saw the world from a single point of view for the first time in eternity. She was lying on the floor of the Temple of Eternal Threads. The great loom hummed above her, its center thread now blazing with the pattern's collected light. And beside her, gasping and shaking, was Kale. Separate, individual, his broken brown thread distinct from her silver gold, but alive. They lay there for a long moment, simply breathing, relearning how to exist as singular beings. And then, slowly, Lyra reached out her hand. Kale took it. And even though she couldn't feel his thoughts anymore, couldn't sense his emotions directly, the touch still meant something, still connected them. Different from what they'd shared in the barrier, but no less real.
We're going to be okay,
She thought, and hoped he somehow knew it too. Above them, the tapestry sang with new strength, and the void retreated, not defeated, but held at bay by something stronger than any individual sacrifice. Held by the pattern itself, woven from countless lives that had chosen to add their light to the whole. Kale squeezed her hand, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse from disuse.
How long were we in there?
Lyra tried to answer, but found her own voice wouldn't work. She pointed weakly at the temple walls, where morning light streamed through the windows at a slant that suggested
3 months.
a voice said. They both turned, too fast, the motion making them dizzy, and saw a figure standing in the temple entrance. A woman, middle-aged, with threads of deep burgundy that pulsed with determination and grief in equal measure. Lyra's mother.
Mama?
Lyra croaked, the word barely audible. Her mother crossed the temple floor in 3 strides and dropped to her knees, pulling Lyra into a fierce embrace.
3 months you've been gone. 3 months I've searched.
3 months I've climbed this damned mountain following rumors of a girl who could see things others couldn't.
She pulled back, gripping Lyra's shoulders, tears streaming down her face.
What happened to you? The whole village thought you were dead. There were memorial services. And then travelers started coming back with stories. Stories about people having visions, seeing connections, understanding their place in some grand pattern. And I knew it was you somehow.
Lyra opened her mouth to explain and realized she couldn't. How could she possibly describe what had happened? The barrier, the merging, the pattern itself. It was too vast, too strange, too...
We died.
Kale said simply, his voice still rough.
And then we came back. And now we have work to do.
Lyra's mother stared at him, then at Lyra, then back at him.
That's the worst explanation I've ever heard.
Despite everything, Lyra laughed. The sound surprised her, rusty and strange after months of communicating through pure thought. But it felt good, felt human.
It's actually pretty accurate.
She said, finding her voice growing stronger.
Mama, I can't explain everything. Not yet. But I need you to trust me. The world is changing. People need to learn to see differently, to connect differently. And I think I'm supposed to teach them.
Teach them what?
Lyra looked at Kale, and even though she couldn't read his mind anymore, she saw understanding in his amber eyes. They'd learned something in the barrier that no one else knew. They'd seen the pattern from the inside, and now they had to find a way to share that vision with a world that desperately needed it.
How to live.
Lyra said finally.
And how to die. And how those things aren't opposites, but part of the same beautiful design.
Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said,
That sounds like something your grandmother would have said.
Maybe that's where I got the gift.
Maybe.
Her mother helped Lyra to her feet, steadying her when she wobbled.
Can you walk?
I think so.
Good, because we're going home. You need food and rest and about 100 answers to questions I'm going to start asking the moment we're off this mountain.
They gathered what few supplies remained in the temple. Most of Amon's possessions had dissolved when his thread ended, returning to the pattern, and began the long descent. Lyra's body felt alien after months without it, every step an act of concentration. But Kale stayed close, and whenever she stumbled, he was there. As they walked, Lyra began to see the changes. The threads throughout the mountain were different, brighter, more interconnected. Animals and plants and the mountain itself, all woven together in patterns that sang with new vitality. The pockets of void she'd sensed before had shrunk or disappeared entirely. You see it too? Kale murmured.
The healing. Yes.
We did that. By showing people the pattern, even just for moments, we help them choose connection over isolation.
But it won't last unless we keep teaching.
Lyra watched a bird's bright yellow thread soar overhead, completely free and utterly bound to the pattern simultaneously.
We have to find a way to help people see what we saw. Not just individuals one at a time, but everyone.
That's impossible.
Probably. But we're going to try anyway.
They reached Chimera as the sun set, painting the village in shades of gold and rose. Lyra saw her home with new eyes, not just the physical structures, but the web of relationships that made it real. Her mother's thread connecting to neighbors, to friends, to the memory of Lyra's father who'd died years ago. Mira's bright pink thread dancing between her parents and siblings. The baker, the blacksmith, the healer, all woven together in a pattern of mutual dependence and care. And she saw the gaps too. The widow who'd isolated herself in grief, her thread pulling inward. The young couple whose threads tangled in resentment rather than love. The merchant whose fear of loss kept him from forming any deep connections. Work to be done, but first, rest. Her mother's house felt too small after the vast awareness of the barrier, but also comforting in its specificity. This This bed, this bowl of soup, real, tangible, hers. Kale was given the guest room, and as Lyra's mother fussed over both of them, Lyra caught his eye across the table. They didn't need to speak. The understanding passed between them anyway.
We survived.
We're here.
We're separate, but not alone.
That night, Lyra dreamed, but it wasn't a normal dream. She found herself standing in a space between spaces, not the barrier, not the real world, but somewhere in between. And she wasn't alone. Hundreds of people stood with her, thousands. All of them people she'd touched through the barrier, shown the pattern to, helped see their connections. They were dreaming too, she realized. All of them drawn together in this liminal space by the memory of what she'd shown them.
You see it now, don't you?
She said, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking or just thinking.
Yes,
They answered in chorus.
we see.
Then show others, not with power or force, but with compassion. Help people see their threads, understand their connections. Teach what I taught you.
But we're not weavers, a man protested. The young man from Chimera, the one who'd nearly ended his own thread. We don't have gifts,
You don't need them.
Lyra realized.
Everyone can see the pattern if they look carefully enough. Everyone can choose connection over isolation. The gift isn't seeing threads. It's choosing to look for them in the first place.
She felt something shift in the dream space, understanding rippling outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. These people would wake up tomorrow and start paying attention, start noticing the connections between things, start teaching others to look for patterns in their relationships, their choices, their lives. It wouldn't be magic. It wouldn't be instant, but it would be real. When Lyra woke, sunlight was streaming through her window, and she could hear Mira's laughter outside. The child playing with friends, her thread bright and unburdened, alive in a world that Lyra had helped preserve. She found Kale already awake, sitting in her mother's garden, staring at his hands. His thread still looked damaged, still writhed and tangled in ways that spoke of fundamental injury. But there was something different about it now. New connections forming, tentative but growing.
I never thought I'd miss having a body.
He said without looking up.
But now that I have it back, I keep noticing how limited it is. I can't sense threads the way I could in the barrier. Can barely manipulate them at all.
Me too.
Lyra sat beside him.
It's like being blind after seeing everything.
Do you regret it? Coming back?
Lyra thought about the question carefully. She missed the vast awareness, the feeling of being connected to everything, missed the intimacy of sharing consciousness with Kale, of never being alone. But she also felt the morning sun on her skin, smelled her mother's cooking, heard Mira's laughter, experienced the specific, limited, precious reality of being a single human in a single moment.
No,
She said finally.
I don't regret it. This is what we were meant to do. Live in the pattern, not above it.
Kale finally looked at her, and she saw something in his amber eyes that made her breath catch. Vulnerability, hope, fear.
Last night I dreamed.
He said quietly.
But not like before. Not like when we were merged. This was my dream, mine alone. And in it, my thread, it wasn't fixed exactly, but it wasn't broken anymore either. It had grown around the damage, incorporated it, made it part of the pattern instead of a wound.
What changed?
I did. I stopped seeing myself as broken and started seeing myself as transformed.
He held out his hand, palm up.
I was afraid being separate from you, afraid I'd go back to that terrible loneliness. But I woke up and realized I carry you with me now. Not your thoughts, not your feelings, but the memory of being seen. Really, truly seen. And that changes everything.
Lyra took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Their threads moved closer, not merging, but dancing around each other in a pattern that was distinctly theirs.
So what do we do now?
She asked.
We teach.
Kale said simply.
We travel. We show people how to see their connections. We help the pattern heal, one thread at a time.
That could take a lifetime.
Probably several lifetimes.
Good thing we're stubborn.
They sat together in the morning light, two separate beings choosing connection, and above them, the tapestry sang with patterns of hope and transformation, and endless, beautiful becoming. End of chapter 4.